But I think that I will go ahead and get started on time since I've got a full hour of content to share with you. So this is part 2 of this series, mainly because last time there were a lot of amazing questions and we didn't get through all of the content. So we'll review a little bit what the highlights were from last week so that everybody's on the same page before we move forwards and talk about the gut microbiome, which is really my area of expertise. As a functional medicine practitioner, I focus on gut health as the number one thing to help people correct for any underlying disease that they have. And it's my intention to really show you in these presentations why that's the case, why our gut health is so important, and why more and more research is coming out every minute about the importance of gut health. It's an educational lecture. Obviously, this is not medical care. But what I really love to invite people to do is to start thinking about our bodies as really being an expression of what it is that we're bathing them in. We eat lots of food throughout our lifetimes, right? We're ingesting all of this food. We breathe air, we drink water, we think things that sometimes are beneficial for our health and sometimes they're not. But our physical body is really an expression of all of that. And I'd like to show you why. I go into a lot of detail when I do these presentations, and there's a reason for that. And the reason is that, you know, someone could tell you, oh, you need to eat more protein, or I think you should go on a low-fat diet. And we can make those changes. We're capable of making change. But unless there's an insight or an aha moment as to why we're making those changes, it's just a change. But what we're really looking for is transformation. For myself, on my own journey, I always wanted to follow a healthy diet. I would go on a gluten-free diet or do this or that, and it would last for a while, and then I would go back to, you know, eating processed foods and things that really weren't good for my body, and this constant roller coaster. And it wasn't until I did my functional medicine training and really had those aha moments that it allowed me to make this transformation that has revolutionized my health for the better. So if you have any questions, since I do tend to go a little bit deeper on the science, please just raise your hand. I love for the workshops to be more interactive versus me talking at you guys. Okay. So today we're just going to review why gut health is important. We'll talk about the characteristics of a healthy gut. And when I say gut, I'm talking about the whole digestive system from the mouth all the way down to the other end. I mean, really, it should be a closed system and a tube that's separate from the rest of our bodies. We will talk about the importance of stomach acid, and if after I talk about that you want to try stomach acidity testing, that's what the instructions and capsules are here for. And if I have time at the end, I'll talk a little bit about colon transit time. Hello. So again, what is it that's determining our health? Our health is a reflection of the choices that we make every single day. And we know this because fewer than 10% of people who have a genetic predisposition to something that would cause chronic disease will actually develop that in their lifetime. And the other 90% is based on what we choose to do. So what the first lecture that I did here was on epigenetics and healthy aging, and it really the idea is to show that, yes, we have DNA within our bodies, and that is a code, but we also have switches on top of that DNA that can be turned on and off by our dietary and lifestyle choices. So we can influence how our DNA is expressed in our bodies. And this is best represented by identical twins, for example, because they have the same DNA, but they can have very different health outcomes. Making sense so far? Okay. And the microbiome is really the intersection of all of these dietary and lifestyle choices. I always, in every lecture that I give, I always like to highlight the fact that the body is self-healing. Sometimes things are a little bit out of balance, and we need to figure out where that imbalance is in order to restore balance into the body so we can live optimally. And obviously there is that 10% of genetics that's going to impact our health, but in general, there is so much that we can do to optimize ourselves. And I always use the example of toxic burden, that the body will continuously build fat cells to bury toxins because the body knows this can't be in the bloodstream. We don't want toxins affecting the organs, so it will just continuously build fat cells when people are overwhelmed with toxins. And those people cannot shed weight until they start to detox first. And so Hippocrates was 2,500 years ago saying all disease begins in the gut. And now we have more and more scientific literature out there that shows us that this is true. It's a quieter group today than usual. So what is the digestive system really there to do? Number one, we need it to break down food. And this happens both chemically, as in with enzymes and stomach acid. Like when we start chewing and things like that, we're producing enzymes that have chemicals in them that will start to work on and break down the food. The breakdown is important because we have to absorb these nutrients. We don't absorb nutrients from food in its whole form. We need the body to do that job for us, and we need the microbiome to participate in that as well. And as far as the mechanical aspect of food breakdown, I'm just talking about chewing. We need to chew each bite maybe 30 to 40 times, and we can practice mindfully eating when we take this on, and we're helping the body digest nutrients by chewing our food carefully like that. We're expecting the digestive system to get rid of waste for us in an efficient way. Again, this tube should be intact from the mouth to the other end. This is a barrier system. This is a key point, that the digestive system is a barrier, keeping everything that we eat. Think about all the stuff that's on and in the food that we eat, and even what we breathe and swallow. We do not want any of that floating around in our bodies outside of the digestive system. So the digestive system is producing these enzymes that we need to break down the food. 80% of our immune system is housed in our gut. And when you think about it, the gut is actually exposed to the external world more than any other part of our bodies, right? We're, like I said, eating food, breathing in things that we swallow. And so in some ways, this is not really internal. It's exposed to the things that are in the external world. And so we really need that immune system in the gut. Those microbiome bugs in our gut are constantly scanning the landscape for things that we eat to see, is this okay? Is this okay? Is this okay? And finally, we need the digestive system to regulate how much water is in the digestive system versus out there in the circulation, as well as electrolytes. When we don't have intact gut health, we can have digestive disorders. But to be quite honest with you, when clients come to me to work with me for various things, it's maybe 50% of the time it's actually a digestive complaint versus something else that's still starting in the gut. We can have immune system dysregulation, and in particular, autoimmune diseases are coming from poor gut health. And we can have nutrient malabsorption, so we can eat all we want, but especially people who have diarrhea a lot, they're not absorbing the nutrients that they're eating. So we really want the gut microbiome. I'm talking about the trillions of organisms that are living inside of us. They're in all of our organs. We were at one time thinking about the microbiome just existing within the gut, but these organisms are everywhere within us. They're even in the brain. And so we want to make sure that we have lots of good bacteria, and these are well studied, and we know they do good jobs for us. And I'll talk about that moving forwards. And we want low levels of harmful pathogens. We don't want this to become out of balance. It's a root cause for almost every disease process that you can think of. When it's not in balance, when we have all these bad microorganisms and not enough good ones to keep us healthy, that's really a root cause of any disease you can think of. We need that strong gut barrier. We want an effective immune response. We don't want too much response from the immune system when things come into the system. We want just the right amount. The microbiome is, I'm going to say, it's responsible for our thoughts. We have two-way communication happening between the gut and the brain. all the time, and it's actually 10 times more going from the gut to the brain than the other way around. So the gut microbiome is helping us produce neurotransmitters and making us feel either good or not so good every single day based on who's living inside of there. And the gut microbiome also helps us regulate our hormones. So particularly detoxifying from things like estrogen, for example, for women and men, there's a whole subset of the gut microbiome called the estrobolome that's responsible for metabolizing estrogen for us. Are we good so far? Yeah, okay. Excellent. So the SAD diet stands for the Standard American Diet, and this has been pretty well studied now that 73% of our food supply, so this is interesting to think of it this way, that they're not saying necessarily what people eat as the percentage of highly processed foods, ultra processed foods. It's actually the 73% of the US food supply is comprised of these ultra processed foods, like, you know, fast food, French fries, hamburgers, things that come in a box like crackers and chips, and even everything with white flour and things like that, and breads. They've got these conditioners in them, stuff that comes in cans like Chef Boyardee that I lived on as a child. I loved that stuff. And it's so bad for us. It's ultra processed. A child today, 90% of their diet is coming from ultra processed foods. And simultaneously, the government is looking at approving those Ozempic injections for ages 6 and up now, because so many of these kids are eating these ultra processed foods, and they're addictive. I think in almost every lecture I've talked about how in the 1950s the government passed the GRAS law, which is generally recognized as safe, and it allowed the industry experts to decide whether or not the chemicals they were putting in food were safe for consumers. So there was no outside body regulating what was being those chemicals. They just let Kraft say, "Oh, no worries, like that's all fine." There are no studies out there showing it's bad, so that means it's fine. And there have been plenty of things that were pulled off the market that fell under this generally recognized as safe law. And then in the
just you said your Chef Boyardee in the 50s. Is it the same thing that we're eating now, or has it been changed to make it even worse?
I would say it's even worse, because in the 1980s, the tobacco industry, you know, in the face of losing so much money because people realized how addictive and bad cigarettes were for their health, they started buying out the food industry. So they bought Kraft and like all these big food industry companies. And because of that GRAS law, they are allowed to put any chemicals they wish that are unstudied for human health in their food products. And these are the experts in chemical addiction that literally sit in a lab and try to figure out what is going to give you the biggest dopamine hit when you nibble on and then start mass consuming their food. It's sad because we assume that there's some regulatory body watching out for us to make sure that this doesn't happen, especially in the face of chronic disease, and that we know how bad ultra-processed food is for us. But it's all kind of, you know, don't worry about that. When they used the slogan, Lay's potato chips, I bet you can't eat just one, they weren't guessing. They designed it that way. So I think that we really need to rethink what we're putting in our bodies. And our bodies run on the information that comes from whole foods. It's full of vitamins and minerals, and we can't run a lot of the chemical processes that happen in our bodies without that information coming from food. Even if we took, and I love supplementation, and I love helping people with supplements, but there's no supplement in the world that's going to save a person from eating an ultra-processed diet.
So, excuse me.
Yes.
So speaking of